call on Government Order of the Day number 6.
Gambling Amendment Bill number 3, first reading.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Peter Dunn.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Gambling Amendment Bill number 3 be now read a first time, and I nominate the Government Administration Committee to consider the bill. Mr Speaker, last week when we were debating the committee stages of the Gambling Amendment number 2 bill, I made the point that the number 3 bill was one more in a series of reforms to make the Gambling Act 2003 fit for purpose in an environment where a whole range of external changes are occurring at a rate that often makes it very difficult for us to keep up. If I go back to the main act, the Gambling Act 2003, it makes it very clear that one of its primary purposes is that it permits gambling other than in casinos to raise funds for the community, which means in turn that the whole system is expected to be operated on a not-for-profit basis. Now, the changes that are contained in this bill tidy up a number of areas of administration. They are not particularly exciting, any or all of themselves, but they are an important set of reforms that make sure that, as I said earlier, our gambling laws remain fit for purpose in this country. Mr Speaker, these changes in this bill relate mainly to the Class 4 sector, which is the gambling operations that rely on electronic gaming machines in pubs and clubs. We have a very complicated regulatory system for these. The tensions between commercial and non-commercial players in this sector over a period of time have been quite high. There is a constant flow of restructuring taking place within the sector as some operators exit and others enter, as some agglomerate and others separate. And it's important that our gambling regime therefore tries as best it can to keep reasonable tabs on this situation. So, Mr Speaker, what this bill does, it's comparatively short, but it introduces 5 key sets of amendments. The first sets of amendments are around reducing red tape, because that's been one of the great banes of the operators and a number of the complaints that we've received from people who seek to gain funding from the proceeds about the amounts being available because of the high operational costs is also important. So these changes will specify venue operators' payments, and they'll also lift the prohibition that's currently in place for payments to venue operators for the commission that's paid to them. So there will be a more flexible arrangement in that regard, and that's designed to remove a lot of the rigidity and the red tape within the system. One of the other very big cries that comes through any talk about gambling reform is the need to give communities better information on grant-making decisions and making sure that they can see the greatest level of transparency possible. And that's the second of the 5 changes. So the reporting requirements for Class 4 operators are being changed so that standardised information about individual recipients will be available. We will also introduce provisions in this bill where grant committee members will have to declare any direct or indirect interest that they may have in successful grants to societies, and the publication of Class 4 operators' financial information and key indicators around that can also be prescribed so that the community will get a better sense of the way in which these organisations are operating and that they can see more directly the benefit that they are likely to derive from the funding that is made available, and they can reach the conclusion whether or not that funding is a reasonable proportion of the amount being raised by those particular machines. The third set of changes relate to conflict of interest provisions, and these changes largely strengthen the current provisions. They ensure that the conflict of interest provisions in the Gambling Act that apply to gambling societies, venue operators and grant recipients are pretty much standardised, and that the opportunities...
I'm sorry to interrupt the Honourable Minister. The time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. The House is suspended and I will resume the chair at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the extended sitting.